welcome in everyone to another edition of the GSMC College Football Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Sports Network. I'm your host, as always, Tommy Brzee. It is Tuesday, July 9th around here, and we have a great show for you today. We're going to start talking a little bit about the media days that are starting today. The main one we're going to discuss today is going to be the Big 12 media days. They're starting today out in Las Vegas. Want to break down that for you guys and some of the big talking points there. Then we'll get into Oregon. They are building something of a Death Star out in Eugene, Oregon right now, and Dan Lanning has done just an incredible job since he's taken over at that place, and I want to break down why that is, why everything is moving really well for Oregon right now, and how I don't necessarily think it's stopping anytime soon. Then we'll get into some talking points. We'll continue the Big Ten today because I feel like we just didn't get quite enough out of the Big Ten yesterday. Might continue it tomorrow, to be totally honest, because there's a couple more that popped into my mind as I was doing it, but we'll get to that when we get there. And then we'll do the best weeks in the 2024 season. I have 3 weeks that are just incredible to stand out above the pack. I think there are 2 others that just barely missed the list as well. So some really incredible weeks this upcoming year. And then I do a little bit of a different top 10 Tuesday today. I wanted to do the guys that I consider appointment television players in our sport. There are a couple that are just absolutely incredible that you just have to be tuning in when they're on the field. So I want to break down those guys as I see it. But before we jump in, I do want to remind you all we get tons of questions and comments throughout the show. And the best way for you all to get your question on the screen, we can have a fun back and forth here, is to use the tip and donation link at the bottom of the screen, gsmcpodcast.net. It's a huge help not only to us here at the network, but to you all. You get to kind of have a fun, interactive experience here, and that's always good for the both of us. But let's jump right in, and let's start talking about the media days that are coming up over the next couple of weeks. Obviously, this is the time of year where we are just chomping at the bit for some college football. We are just waiting for something to happen. We're waiting, as Jackie Moon said in why am I blanking on the movie? In Semi-Pro. Man, that's upsetting. But we want to see somebody hit somebody. That's the goal at this time of year. We're ready to get some football finally, but it's taken a little bit of time. But the good news is we do have a ton of craziness coming this week, next week, and the following throughout media days because it's going to be crazy. I can almost promise you that. But first, before we jump into the Big 12 in particular, let's jump into the schedule for all of the media days. Obviously, the Big 12 start today and tomorrow. They'll be in action in Arizona State, Cincinnati, Iowa State, Kansas State, Oklahoma State, TCU, Texas Tech, and Utah will all be today. And then the remainder of the teams will be on the next day. So Colorado will be tomorrow. You'll have Houston tomorrow, Kansas, West Virginia, a ton of other teams that are super interesting to hear from. So the day one is really a show. When you look at that day one, it's really just remarkable the amount of big-time teams going into this year. I mean, the top 3 teams in that media poll that I showed you last week, and I do have in this segment as well, those are the top 3 teams: Oklahoma State, Kansas State, and Utah. Those are the teams that everyone is circling when you go into the season, and they're going to have some big questions for these guys today, and it'll be fascinating to hear from guys like Cam Rising, guys like Alan Bowman, and we'll get into some other guys, particularly on the Oklahoma State side, that we're going to be listening to. And then Day 2 is going to get plenty of love because of Colorado. Colorado is the story in this conference. They will be as long as Deion's in attendance. But also, you do have Kansas. You do have West Virginia. You have a ton of other teams you'd like to hear from. I think UCF, Baylor, and Houston are going to be fascinating to hear from with some of the different changes and some question marks around, particularly Baylor and Houston more so than UCF. But even UCF, addressing some of the transfer portal moves they made, will be very interesting to hear from in Gus Malzahn. So it'll be fascinating to watch all of that unfold. But let's jump into the Big 12 and let's talk about all of the things that are going to happen this week. Obviously, it's a new look Big 12. You add Colorado, Utah, Arizona State. So a new look. Definitely that will be a huge topic of conversation going into this week. I do think there will be a little bit of talk around conference realignment, but if you look around the landscape, they tend to be, the Big 12 that is, tends to be the one that's least involved, at least as of right now, at least in the forefront, as we can tell. Obviously, a lot of this stuff happens behind closed doors, so it'll be interesting to see how much they're involved down the road. But as of right now, they're kind of a little bit lurking in the back, while the ACC, the Pac-12 are out in front, and the SEC and the Big Ten will always be out in front. But obviously, hearing from Brett Yormark will be incredibly interesting. He's someone that orchestrated a lot in the last, even 365 days for the Big 12, and it's a huge thing that they're going into over the next couple of years. And he's a really confident guy, and I think he's someone that has a total control over what he wants his conference to be and the way that he wants it to run. So a lot of confidence out there about who he is and about the way that he goes about business, and I think there should be that confidence. He's a really remarkable commissioner and did a lot of really incredible things since he's taken over. So it'll be fascinating to hear from him as they head into this kind of new era of the Big 12. But let's get into some of the biggest talking points. And whenever you talk talking points, it's always about Deion. Deion and Colorado are the show. There's no two ways about that. They are the ones that everyone's going to be asking questions about, regardless of what the record was a year ago. They're the ones that everyone is super interested in going into this year. I'm not exactly sure who is representing Colorado yet. I assume Shadur will be there. I hope Travis Hunter will be there, although I've seen some conflicting reports, so not exactly sure who is going for Colorado, but will be great to hear from some of those players, get an idea of how the offseason's going, see, what strides they feel like they're making on the offensive or defensive side of the ball, and so many different things that we'll be able to see. And then obviously Deion's going to give us some quotes. There's no two ways about that. The confidence is absolutely palpable whenever you hear Deion speak, and he's going to give us some great stuff to talk about. So obviously love that. I do want to address something. I did a segment probably about a week ago at this point talking about Colorado and the expectations on them and how a lot of the expectations might be a little bit unfair. Well, I made a little bit of a mistake. I said Deion had said that the Big 12 and the playoff are the goals for this season. That is something that I must have just misconstrued through the offseason, because that's not exactly what he had said. He says that he has his eyes set on a bowl game this year, and then he believes that they can be successful in the future and make playoffs, and obviously that's something he'd like to do this year, but he has his eyes set on a more realistic goal. So obviously that would have changed the way that I addressed that, and obviously apologies for misconstruing what he was saying, but this is obviously going to be a very interesting topic of conversation. I do think some of the expectations from the fan base are a little bit lofty, but that's a totally different conversation that we can address throughout the season. But the other thing I'm watching is, who's the big dog at the table? Who's the team that everyone's kind of surrounding, that everyone thinks is kind of the leader of the pack right now? And frankly, I think it's Oklahoma State. I don't necessarily think that will be the case at the end of the season. I think it's I think the reality is there for Utah or Kansas State or Kansas or one of those other teams to make their way up into that position. But I think when you walk into this new conference, they're just coming off a conference title trip. They lost to Texas, obviously, but Texas is no longer around, neither is OU. So it feels like Oklahoma State is sitting at the top perch, at least as of right now. That will obviously change throughout the season, and maybe it won't change. Maybe they'll even lengthen that gap even more. Who knows? But at the end of the day, it'll be a very interesting couple of days for Oklahoma State. Obviously, one of the big topics of conversation is Ollie Gordon. He will be in attendance along with Nate Martin, Colin Oliver, Alan Bowman, a lot of really talented veteran players for them. There will be questions about that DUI arrest that happened to Ollie Gordon last week, and I really like that Mike Gundy is having him come. I think there was a question of would he be in attendance or would he not because of all the things going on around that type of thing. But I think it's always good to put your guy front and center and have him answer some of these questions that are going to be difficult to answer. But this is the reality. And I think it's a good precedent to set, to say our guy just made a huge mistake. He probably knows he made a huge mistake, and we're going to put him out in front and let him answer for that. And I think that's obviously it gives you an idea of how Mike Gundy goes about business. He was not letting Ollie Gordon get off with this and with absolutely no repercussions, that's for sure. I think more will come, honestly, but I do think putting him out there, making him go to Big 12 Media Days and get some of those tough questions is going to be very important, to be totally honest. And then the other team that everyone's going to be watching, obviously, is Utah, for a number of different reasons, not just because they are the favorite walking into this conference, and a lot of people will want to hear how the team is going, but Cam Rising coming back from an injury is a huge topic of conversation. We'll likely hear from him. I believe he is one of the group going, and I think he's going to be really interesting to hear from because you never really know how a kid's feeling until you can kind of see him in person and get the feeling from what he's saying. So I tend to believe he's more than fine. I tend to believe he's fully healthy, but it was a very weird year last year. And a lot of things happened that it felt like he was going to come back, and then he never quite did. So you never really know. And you hope that he's fully healthy and ready to roll, and we'll hear more about that. And also, they have a new head coach in waiting. Morgan Scalley will be in Las Vegas this next couple of days, and will likely be asked questions about that. And so it'll be very interesting to see if anyone just outright ask Kyle Whittingham if this is his last year, if he's done after this year, or if they kind of tiptoe around it a little bit. Frankly, I hope they ask, because I'm very interested to know. I tend to believe that this is, but who knows? It'll be very interesting to kind of unpack all of the stuff around Utah this time of year. And then the state of Kansas is finally a topic of conversation at the Big 12 Media Days, which is kind of a weird world to live in, but Kansas is a team that I frankly think America is just going to fall in love with this year. I think it's kind of like Missouri from a year ago, where this team is going to be so much fun. They're going to have so many guys across the field that are really, really fun to watch, that it's just going to be hard not to really, really like this team. Jalen Daniels obviously is the main reason for that. He's just absolutely electric. I think Lance Leipold is about as fun a coach as you could possibly have. And frankly, I think he has every chance to walk in and be the team that dominates the Big 12 going forward. So the Jayhawks have a ton riding on this year, and as long as Jalen Daniels is on the field, things get really interesting really quickly, that's for sure. And then you have Kansas State, obviously another favorite walking into this season. Avery Johnson will likely be there, another reason why they are so highly rated going into this season. And hearing from him, hearing how he's adjusting to the offense, because a new offense with Colin Klein making his way down to A&M, it'll be fascinating to hear all of that. And then Chris Klieman has a chance to make a huge splash this year. Everyone knows how good he is. Everyone knows that he's a really good coach. This is the year where he maybe wins a Big 12 title, maybe goes to the playoff, maybe puts his name a little bit more on the forefront than it frankly already should be, but that's beside the point. Obviously, the Big 12 Media Days and all Media Days are absolutely crazy. There's going to be a ton of different things that come out over the next couple of days and weeks around this stuff, and it'll be really interesting to see what happens in the Big 12 one. I think this one will be relatively more tame than the others, just because the conference realignment stuff isn't quite as aggressive in the Big 12, but there's going to be plenty of stuff to talk about. I can almost promise you that. This is that media poll that I talked about earlier. Utah, Kansas State, Oklahoma State leading the way. A ton of mess in the middle, to be totally honest with you. And then you have a couple teams towards the bottom that likely won't make noise, but Baylor and Houston are two that I'm watching a little bit closer than the rest. I'll just put it that way. But I do think media days are that time of year where you really start feeling the juices flowing, right? You really start to feel like football is really going to start happening here pretty soon. You get to hear from the coaches. You get to hear from the players. You get that excitement. So it's starting today. It's not going to stop until very late in this month, and we're going to cover it all. And I just cannot wait, because I think there's going to be incredible amounts of news on the field, but also there's going to be realignment news. There's going to be house settlement news. There's going to be some coaching news. There's going to be news all over the place, and we'll break it down as it comes out. But really love this time of year, because it gets every fiber of my being just incredibly excited for the upcoming season. So just cannot wait for that. But we're going to take our first break here, and when we come back, we're going to talk about Oregon. They are building what I would describe as a Death Star out in Eugene, Oregon right now, and I want to break down how they're doing it and why Dan Lanning is just passing with flying colors right now. It's just absolutely incredible what he's doing. So we'll break that down right after this, so stick with us.
I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign.
I wanna be the greatest. Everybody on the fake shit. I look around and feel like everybody is the fakest. I make this every day and I'm impatient, hoping one day I blow up from the basement. Statement, the top is so vacant. I don't hear shit that I think is amazing. Waiting for my day when I'm playing sold out shows with 1,000 faces. Hey, give me that crown, get in my way and to be put down. It ain't your place, all this my town. If I want that shit, then I'll get it right now. I'm losing it, the noose it fits. I'm losing shit, a stupid myth. You choose to live or choose to dip. You choose to fight or lose your grip and lose a gift.
I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind?
Alrighty, welcome back everyone. We just talked about some of the media days coming up, and particularly the Big 12, and how it's going to be a few very active days out in Las Vegas, and we'll learn a lot about this upcoming conference that has a lot of ers and ahs, and I absolutely love it going into this season. But let's start to break down Oregon and how there is a powerhouse forming before our eyes. I couldn't find the words there, but this is obviously a big topic of conversation in college football right now. Oregon is everything right now. They are dominating on the recruiting trail. They are going into the season, into the Big Ten with all the aspirations in the world to win a national title, to win the Big 12 in their first year, and to kind of take over in some aspects. So obviously a lot riding on this year, but how are they pulling all this off? What happened out in Oregon that kind of changed everything? And the biggest thing that you can point to and say confidently that is where a lot of this stuff started happening is when that guy got hired. Dan Lanning has totally flipped this thing on its head. And it's not to say Mario Cristobal and the last staff didn't do an incredible job out there, because they really did. They had a number of years that were really impressive, got to the Pac-12 championship a couple of times, did some really good things. Dan Lanning is building something different. He's not building a Pac-12 powerhouse. He is building an SEC or a Big Ten powerhouse, and he was doing it before Oregon even made the jump to the Big Ten. That was the difference. The second that he walked in the door, everything was just a little bit different. The intensity in the recruiting world was just a little bit higher, and they were going after kids that, frankly, Oregon in the past just didn't go after as aggressively as Dan Lanning has, and some of that comes with, being under Nick Saban and Kirby Smart in the past. Some of that comes with just the crazy confidence that this guy has in his program and his players. So I do think that is the big thing that happened. Obviously, this is a fantastic head coach. I could easily argue top 5 head coach in the country right now. And that might just go up this year because they're just doing incredible things. And I think one of the biggest things is the recruiting that they're doing is just ridiculous. It's off the charts. They're currently number 5 in the recruiting rankings according to 247 Sports. And I expect them to jump up as the month goes on. I think there's still guys out there. DJ Pickett, the number 1 cornerback in the country. Michael Terry, the number 1 athlete in the country. They're kind of fighting Texas for him, which will be a very interesting fight because they just won a fight against Texas with DeCorian Moore. And then you also have Jonah Williams, a very talented safety, and Trey McNutt, the other very talented safety in this class. Both tend to be leaning towards Oregon. So just ridiculous what they're doing on the trail right now. It's absolutely insane, and a lot of people will point to NIL. A lot of people will point to the amount of money they have in their back pocket with the relationship they have with Nike, and that's the reality. There's no one kind of dodging that. The NIL absolutely is playing a part in what they're doing out there. They're also just out recruiting people. I talked about it a little bit yesterday when we talked about DeCorian Moore. They just had a better pitch than Texas did. And DeCorian Moore responded to that pitch a little bit better than he did to Texas. And I saw some of the numbers being thrown around about DeCorian Moore and what he got in NIL. I don't buy any of that, to be totally honest with you. I think Oregon just out-recruited them. And I think one of the big reasons for that was a hire that they made here pretty recently. And I think this is a guy that is going to be a huge riser in this industry and someone that you're going to want to know here pretty soon, and that's Rashad Samples. This is an absolutely huge hire by Dan Lanning this past cycle. When Carlos Loughlin found his way over to Ohio State to be the running back coach, he brought in Rashad Samples. Rashad Samples was a wide receiver coach down at Arizona State prior to this, so a very interesting hire. There's no two ways about that, but when you see what this guy can do on the recruiting trail, it gets a lot different a lot quicker. This guy is absolutely incredible. And one of the big things here is DeCorian Moore was the big-time pickup for Oregon this past week and has been it's the biggest commitment they've ever had at that university. So obviously it was huge for them. Rashad Samples' dad is the head coach of DeCorian Moore's high school, Duncanville. He's a legendary high school football coach down in Texas, and that's got to help. There's no two ways about that. So obviously Dan Lanning knows exactly what he's doing. He is executing a vision, and he's executing it just remarkably well. So I do think there is a energy around Oregon that just hasn't really been there in the past, and there's this one big reason that sometimes gets a little bit overlooked to a certain extent, but also is just wildly important to any program being as successful as Oregon has been the last little bit, and that's just everyone being in alignment, everyone understanding that this is the time for them to take that next step, for Oregon to jump into the next echelon of college football. And one of the big things that happened when NIL and the portal and all of this stuff was introduced to college football was there were a couple of teams that we circled. There were a couple of teams that we felt like had that ability to really take advantage of the portal, of NIL, of all the things that were happening in the sport. Oregon was definitely on that list. Texas was definitely on that list. They've both done an incredible job utilizing both of those things and making them just that little bit better, taking them up to that next level. And obviously Texas taking them up a couple of levels over the last couple of years. And then you have a couple of teams that you circled in the past that haven't done that. USC being the main one that I'm thinking about, because they should be better than they are right now. The NIL, everything should be in a better place than it is right now. And I think it's because of the alignment behind the scenes. It's just not working. The communication between Lincoln Riley and the AD and the president and the boosters, there's a disconnect somewhere. And they better hurry up. I'll talk about this a little bit more later, but they better hurry up because Oregon is really cooking right now. But we talked about the staff. We talked about Rashad Samples and just how incredible he's been. He's been at 4 places in 4 years, and it's not necessarily because he keeps getting kicked out of places. It's because he keeps getting promotions and better opportunities to go after. So obviously he's going to be a very interesting guy over the next couple of years, but Junior Adams deserves all the respect in the world as well. This guy has done incredible things with this wide receiver room since he's shown up as the wide receiver coach, from evaluating talent in the portal and in high school to development. All of it's off the charts. It's just incredible to watch guys like Tez Johnson take that next step. It's just incredible. I mean, going out and getting a guy like Evan Stewart from Texas was not going to be an easy thing to do, and they were able to pull that off. Absolutely huge for them. So I think this is a guy that is going to be another quick riser in this industry, could be a guy that maybe takes over some play calling duties after Will Stein gets that big time job, because Will Stein and Tosh Lupoy are remarkable coordinators, and I would be shocked if they weren't head coaches at some point in the next 3 to 5 years. I think both those guys are just out of this world incredible, and I think if Oregon does what I expect them to do, they're going to be more than fine. There's no two ways about that. You also have Alik Terry, the O-line coach, came in last year, did a really good job with that O-line, even though there was some holes here and there. So obviously will be a lot better this upcoming year. Drew Mehringer is a very, very talented guy, very experienced, was the wide receiver coach at Texas back in the day when Tom Herman was there, has made the move over to tight end and is a fantastic recruiter and has done a great job out there. Chris Hampton, the co-DC and DB's coach, was the Tulane DC during that magical run that ended in a Cotton Bowl win over USC. So they're doing an incredible job of building out this group. Tony Tuiti is a fantastic D-line coach that I think is only going to get better as this team gets better, but a lot of stuff is going in the right direction for Oregon, on the field, off the field, behind the scenes. Everything is working perfectly, and it's really a testament to that guy. I can't talk about Dan Lanning enough, if I'm being totally honest. The dude walked into a situation at a very, very big university with a situation that not everyone would handle perfectly, and has just rolled from start to finish. He's just been absolutely incredible. The only blip on his radar really is those 2 losses to Washington a year ago, and then just getting absolutely blown out in his first game against Georgia. So if those are the only 2 blips on him, that's more than fine, to be totally honest with you. This is a very, very talented head coach, and everything at Oregon is just that little bit different. They're a little bit tougher. They're a little bit meaner. They play with a little bit more aggression than everyone around them, and it's prepared them for this moment where they're walking into the Big Ten not worried about the physicality, not worried about their guys not being able to just line up and go 11 on 11 with the guys in front of them, because he has tons of dudes just across the board. So I think this has been one of the more impressive coaching jobs over the last couple of years. He came into a situation that I'm not going to sit here and act like it was a dumpster fire by any means. There was a lot there at Oregon that was very, very nice for him because Mario and company were really good at recruiting, but he's taken it up a notch. And that last 5 or 10% to get to that elite level is the hardest 5 or 10%. There's no two ways about that. So Oregon has a chance this year to just kick the door down, win the Big Ten, go to the playoff, possibly win a national title, and then things get really interesting out there. Because if you think they're a force in recruiting now, if they get a national championship under their belt, I don't know if there's any stopping them. I'll be totally honest with you. They are absolutely going to roll over people in the recruiting world, because that's really the only thing that's been missing from up there for quite some time, is consistent winning seasons that puts you at the top of college football. If you can get that going forward, you're going to have no problem up there in Oregon. And I think you might just be able to find yourself into that group of the Georgia, Alabama, Ohio State groups going forward. I think also Texas is another team that absolutely could make their way up into that grouping, because the sport is coming towards them, and they grabbed it with both hands and have not let go. That's for sure. So Oregon, overall, the biggest thing here is just everything's in place. There's not a thing at that university that feels rickety. There's not a bolt that's a little bit loose. Everything is exactly the way that it needs to be for them to be elite. And they have the head guy that is willing to do all of the things you need to do. And he learned it from the two best that I've ever seen do it, in Nick Saban and Kirby Smart. And I know that sounds a little bit crazy about Kirby Smart. I'm being honest. I've never seen anyone do what Kirby Smart is doing, other than Nick Saban, obviously, because he did everything. But right now, you just be hard-pressed to find a program that is working at a higher level than the Oregon Ducks. It's absolutely incredible, and it's a scary sight for pretty much every Big Ten fan and every fan in college football across the country, because this is a scary team. And it's a team that the potential has always been there to be one of the dominant teams in college football. They're realizing that, and it's getting very real very fast, that's for sure. But we'll break that down more and more as the season goes on. But we're going to take our second break here, and when we come back, we're going to get back into some talking points around the Big Ten. Didn't quite get through what I wanted to in this yesterday, so I want to break that down today, and we'll do that right after this break, so stick with us.
Looking for your daily fix of sports talk without having to pay for it? GSMC Sports Network is available on YouTube. Just search GSMC Sports Network. Get your fix of daily sports talk shows on YouTube, absolutely free. NFL, college football, NBA, MLB, MMA, UFC, fantasy football, and so much more. GSMC Sports Network has shows running all day long, with new sports shows starting every 2 hours. Just like on your favorite cable sports channel, except GSMC Sports Network is absolutely free. Just search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube to catch one of your new favorite shows, like the GSMC College Football Podcast, Chip Shot Football Podcast, Hoops and Heels Women's Sports Podcast, GSMC Basketball Podcast, and so many more. Check it out for yourself. GSMC Sports Network, now available on YouTube absolutely free. Search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube right now.
Alrighty, welcome back, everyone. We just talked about Oregon and how everything is going right up in Eugene right now, and it doesn't seem like it's slowing down anytime soon. So I would get used to Oregon being at the very top of college football, I'll just put it that way. But let's get back into some talking points around the Big Ten heading into fall camp and into the season, and there's a ton of them. We broke down 4 yesterday, and I kind of want to get into another 4 today, and maybe we'll do another 4 tomorrow, because there are a couple that popped into my head as I was doing this that I really like to cover. So we'll kind of work through this talking point segment over the next couple of weeks as we get through the Power 4 conferences. But let's jump in here, and the first question I have is about Penn State, and it's really a very simple question. Is Penn State ready to turn that corner? And I've talked about this on here a lot, where the 12-team playoff benefits a ton of different teams. I think Tennessee is on that list. I think Missouri is on that list. I think LSU is on that list. Penn State might be at the very top of that list, because when you look at the past, 8, 10 seasons of Penn State, you'll find 10-2 a lot of times. That has kind of been the Penn State season of the last, little bit since James Franklin has taken over. And that's obviously not ideal, because in the past it's kept you out of the playoff, it's kept you out of most Big Ten championships, and it's just not been a very fun time. You've kind of a Groundhog Day situation out there in Penn State, but they have a chance to turn the corner this year. Obviously, they are a team that if they go 10-2 against the schedule that they're playing, they're in the playoff. I feel very confident about that. I can say that with no hesitation, but it doesn't change that adds some pressure. Once you get into the playoff, people want to see playoff wins. That's the reality of this sport. You have some teams like Oklahoma's been there 4 times, never gotten a win. That is a thing that their fans hate and that their fans really want to rectify this year or the next couple of years. So obviously, it's going to be an incredible thing to watch. Kind of, can they turn that corner? Can they become the team that has always really been there, but they just haven't had those couple other inches? We talked about it with Oregon. That last 5 or 10% to get to that elite level is really hard to get, and Penn State has been fighting to get it for quite some time. So the big thing here, obviously, is the change in coordinators. Tom Allen and Andy Kotelnicki coming in might be the 2 most important people in the Big Ten, or at least among that group. That's for sure. I think these 2 guys can turn this season on its head, particularly Andy Kotelnicki, because whatever him and Drew Aller do together will define this season for Penn State. They're going to play good defense. There's almost no question about that. They have some really, really good players all across their defense, and although they did lose some big-time players, Abdul Carter is going to be an absolute game wrecker. I think A.J. Harris coming over from UGA was a huge pickup for that back end. They're going to be more than fine. I have very few questions about Tom Allen and that defense. Andy Kotelnicki can open up this team. He can make this team a title contender. They can win the Big Ten. They can go to the playoff. They can make some noise because that's how good this team is. The problem is there's been a couple of games over the past couple of years where they've just looked flat. Whether it was Drew Aller against Ohio State and Michigan just getting absolutely shut down a year ago and looking really bad, to be totally honest with you. This is a team that can win this conference. This is a team that really isn't that far off from winning this conference. They need a couple of things to go their way, particularly on the offensive side of the ball. But if all of that happens, if Drew Aller and Andy Kotelnicki is a marriage that works out just beautifully, this is a really interesting team. And this is a team that has a lot of things in place. And Drew Aller is someone that can really just be the biggest domino player in all of college football if he hits the way that he's definitely capable of. We saw flashes last year, but now it's time to really show up the entirety of the year. So it'll be really interesting to watch that unfold. But the other one I want to talk about is Nebraska stepping back into the spotlight this year, because it feels like this is the moment in Lincoln. You brought in Dylan Raiola, the savior of the program, as he is being dubbed out there. It's one of the most historic brands in college football. They want to be back in the forefront. They want to be in the spotlight. They want to be a team that everyone's talking about. And they have a really good shot to do it this year. They are going to be favored in every single game up until week 9 when they play Ohio State. That Colorado game is obviously going to be tough, one that they did not look all that good in a year ago and got, I don't want to say blown out because that scoreboard was a little bit different than what happened on the field, but regardless, did not go the way that they wanted it to. And both teams have made great steps forward this upcoming year. It's going to be in Lincoln, which is a huge win for them, so it'll be fascinating to watch. But if they win that game, they're likely 8-0 walking into that Ohio State game, and then things get really interesting. They don't necessarily have to win that game. If they play it tough, I think they're still very much in this conversation of this is a different Nebraska team. There's no two ways about that. So I think it's going to be really, really fascinating to watch this team unfold because this is a team that can totally just turn over college football this year. I think a lot of people have kind of shrugged off Nebraska for quite some time, but they have an opening this year to do something really special. They can win 10 games, truly. If they go 2-1 in those Iowa, USC, Wisconsin, if they go 2-1 in those 3 games, 10-2 is very much on the table, which means the playoff is very much on the table. So while all of that sounds crazy because of what Nebraska has been the last, decade or so, or even more than a decade, frankly, but this is a team that is ready to kind of make that splash, to take that step forward, to get themselves back into the forefront of college football, and it's shaping up for them pretty well. That's for sure. It'll be very, very fascinating to watch this team, and it'll be fascinating to watch that guy right there. Dylan Raiola is one of the most important people that has come through Nebraska football in a very long time. There is a lot on his shoulders, and if he answers the bell, this team gets really interesting, and his story becomes just that much more incredible. So it'll be awesome to watch this team, one of the teams that I'm most excited to watch unfold over this next year. But next I want to get to a team that is heading in the wrong direction. USC. What is happening? I know that sounds a little bit crazy, and I know that I might be overreacting just a little bit, but this recruiting cycle has been terrible. There's really no other way to put it for USC. Justice Terry, Isaiah Gibson, Hilton Stubbs, Anquan Fagans, Jet White, all were committed, now decommitted. All of those guys were hugely important, all on the defensive side of the ball where you need to be recruiting at a high level. I understand losing Justice Terry. I understand losing Isaiah Gibson. Those guys, you're right in Georgia. You're going to be fighting those teams. That's going to be a hard fight to win against Kirby Smart. Hilton Stubbs is one that you could be able to win. I get Miami's doing an incredible job in recruiting right now. You should be able to beat them out, just plain period. I don't care where that guy lives. I'm going to be totally honest. And also, I saw a segment that was done by Josh Pate a couple of days ago talking about USC, and he said something that I thought was really interesting, talking about the people behind the scenes, and we talked about this earlier with Oregon. Alignment is maybe the most important thing to a college football team being successful. If everyone is not pulling in the same direction, you're really screwed. I'll just be totally honest with you. It's what happened at Texas for so long, where there was, a couple of people pulling in one direction against a head coach, a couple of people pulling another direction towards a head coach. You're never going to be successful that way. And it seems like that's what's happening at USC, and that should never be the case. We talked about it earlier. NIL and transfer portal came into the sport. USC might have been at the very top of the list as the teams of, they're going to take full advantage of this, especially with Lincoln Riley as their head coach. They're going to be the team that really makes their way up over the next couple of years. It hasn't happened yet. They've made some, they made waves when Caleb Williams was there for the first year. They almost got to a Pac-12 championship and ended up losing to Utah. They've done some things. They need to be better than this. Going forward, they just have to be recruiting at a higher level. They have to be able to flex their muscles a little bit more. You are USC. You're in LA. You are one of the biggest brands in the sport, and you're one of the most fun brands in the sport. When you are good, there are celebrities coming out. There's so much pageantry around that program, and they're leaving a lot of it on the table because of some things that are just out of control for Lincoln Riley. And that's very upsetting because, frankly, Lincoln Riley's doing pretty much all the right things. All the things he's saying are the right things. The staff hires, the energy around that program, the recruiting, at least efforts of the recruiting are much better than they were a couple of years ago at USC. The last lever just has to be flipped, and that is NIL, that is alignment, that is getting everyone on the same page and pulling in the same direction. And if you don't do it soon, Oregon might be just way too far ahead to catch. So USC is kind of on a ticking clock right now where it doesn't necessarily have to be they totally have to blow everyone out of the water the rest of the recruiting cycle and have a fantastic year this year, but they got to show us something. They got to show us a heartbeat. They got to show us that they know that they're USC and that they know that they have a little bit more power to utilize some of the NIL and transfer portal opportunities that some other schools just don't. So I'm not necessarily selling USC. I'm not necessarily selling Lincoln Riley by any means. I do think he's a very fantastic coach and likely will get some things figured out there, but some of this stuff is just out of his hands. If the people behind the scenes, if the people writing the checks, frankly, if those people are not on board, it's really hard to be successful. That's just the plain honest truth. So it'll be fascinating to watch that unfold because USC's up against it, that's for sure. And then finally, I want to talk about Iowa and the reinvention that is going on in Iowa right now, and I worry that it's not going to be as big of a reinvention as we want, because it's got to be a different offense. It just has to be, and it not only does it have to be, tinkered with, it needs to be an entirely different offense. The offense that they're running in Iowa is, I respect the hustle. I got to be honest, I really do love the 3 yards in a cloud of smoke way that they're going about business. It's not winning football. That's just the reality. So Tim Lester coming in from the NFL, bringing kind of that NFL-style offense, I think is going to be a huge benefit to them because it does give them the ability to still lean on the run, to still be Iowa and be who they are, but also play with the passing game a little bit more, play with some motions and some different things. And that's really the big thing that was zeroed in on this offseason was Tim Lester coming in. More motion is going to be used way more often. Iowa was very, very low on the motion moniker of how many times you used motion per game, and most of the teams that had elite offenses were very, very high on that list. That's kind of the new thing in college football is the guys that perfect motions, the guys that perfect pre-snap movements and things of that nature tend to have the best offenses. So it's going to be really interesting to watch this unfold because Kirk Ferentz has been doing things the same way for a very long time. He has not budged as everything has happened around him with Ohio State and LSU and Oklahoma all putting up just ridiculous numbers offensively. He doesn't care. He's going to play his game. So there is a little bit of a worry on my end that how much of this offense is really Tim Lester's? How much is he really just handing over the reins to him and letting him go to work? Because I think if he does, this could be a relatively potent offense. And if it is a potent offense, the defense is going to take care of itself. And they can be in that Big Ten conversation to win that title. And if they pull that off, then things get really interesting very fast. But overall, there is still a worry for me. You know, how much is it going to change? How much is this Tim Lester's offense? How much is this Kirk Ferentz offense? And we'll find out on week 1 and week 2. And we'll see how this kind of new experiment, I suppose, around Iowa heads. But Tim Lester is one of the most important guys in that conference and definitely will be someone that has a ton to say about what Iowa is this upcoming year. But let's take our third break here. When we come back, we're going to talk about some of the best weeks in the 2024 season. I have 3 weeks in particular that I want to zero in on. Maybe we'll do another one, honestly, because there are a couple other weeks that it was splitting hairs. I'll just be totally honest. So we'll break down that right after this, so stick with us.
For the best and latest podcasts available anywhere, go to the podcast app on your cell phone and type in GSMC to access free content-rich podcasts on health and wellness, book reviews, sports, entertainment, relationships, social media, movies, technology, finance, and even weird news. Subscribe and download the GSMC Podcast Network's family of shows, available everywhere podcasts are found.
Alrighty, welcome back everyone. We just did a couple of talking points heading into the Big Ten season. I think we'll likely do one more Big Ten segment tomorrow because there's a couple more that I want to break down around Washington, around Wisconsin, some different teams that I feel like deserve a little bit of love in this conversation. But let's get into segment 4 and let's talk about the best weeks in the 2024 season. There are some really good ones. Frankly, there is the best collection of college football games I've ever seen in this upcoming season. I'll be totally honest with you. This 1 week that I'm going to break down here in a second is just as beautiful as it gets. I'll be totally honest. I absolutely love it. So let's get into this. And week 7 is just different. It truly is just all over the place, just incredible. It's out of this world how many great games are out there. I mean, Ole Miss LSU is an absolutely huge game. I think there's so many games in the SEC this upcoming year. Georgia plays Bama, Ole Miss, Texas. Texas plays Georgia, obviously. They got Oklahoma. They have to go to A&M. There are games where you have the big dogs, and they could easily get slipped up. This could be the game that decides who's the second team in Atlanta. And that would be a huge thing for LSU. Obviously, getting this at home is huge, but there's going to be a lot of, as we like to say it in college football, cannibalism in this conference. And I think this game could be one of the most important when we look back at the SEC season. Florida at Tennessee is one of those that just, this is a great rivalry. These two teams absolutely hate each other. Florida has, frankly, really controlled this rivalry for quite some time, and they want to continue to do that. They kind of want to throw a wrench into Tennessee's works, and as I look through the Florida schedule, they play just an incredibly tough schedule all across. They're going to get one of these games. I'm not confident that it's going to be at Tennessee. It might be Georgia. It might be Texas. It might be one of those other teams, but I can almost promise you Florida's going to clip one of these teams. And it's going to come as a surprise whenever it happens, but I do believe that Florida has enough guys to make some things happen. And then you have the main event. Ohio State at Oregon is just going to be incredible. It's obviously the first time they're playing as conference foes, but they played not too long ago and split that series and don't necessarily love each other because of that series. So I think there will be a little bit of energy behind that one. If both walk in undefeated, which I tend to expect them to be undefeated when they walk in there, it's going to be one of the best games in all of the season of college football. There's no two ways about that. Then you have Texas-Oklahoma, the first SEC Red River rivalry, and wow, that really rolled out weird. But Texas and OU, I think I've talked about this a little bit on here, but I think once they get in front of some SEC eyes, people are going to realize just how special this one is. This one is totally different than any other rivalry we have in college football, and at that 3:30 slot, let's just say the fans are going to be plenty hydrated for this one, or a little bit dehydrated, but that's beside the point. And then you have some other games. You have, I totally forgot we had pictures. There's an LSU Ole Miss picture. But let's get into USC and Penn State. This one is very interesting because Penn State's heading all the way down to Southern California to play a conference game. Not one that I'm going to be used to. There's no two ways about that. So that'll be very, very interesting to watch. I think this is another game like we talked about yesterday with Penn State and West Virginia. Penn State's got to win this one. And they don't necessarily have to win it by a ton and dominate USC by any means, but they got to prove that they're a step above them. There's no two ways about that. But then you also have South Carolina at Bama. You have KSU, Colorado, Iowa State, West Virginia, Washington, Iowa, Memphis, USF is going to be incredible. Coastal Carolina against JMU. So many great games in this week, and I just cannot wait. I think this is the best week of the entire season, and it's followed very closely up by Week 11. I think this one's absolutely awesome. This was the one I was fighting between Week 9 and Week 11 here, but I landed on Week 11 because of some of the depth in the games that might not be in the top 5 here. But you have some of the other games on this in this group are Mississippi State heading to Tennessee. You have Duke at NC State. Miami at Tech is going to be a very interesting one for Miami, where they could get slipped up by that Georgia Tech team. And then you have Washington, Penn State, another one that, why are they playing a conference game that far away? But that's beside the point. Florida at Texas is going to be awesome. Fresno State at Air Force, and then App State at Coastal Carolina. All of those are just going to be really great games. But the top 5, the top 1 is Alabama at LSU. I'll just be totally honest. This one has a juice behind it that kind of like that UGA game where kind of like every single game that Alabama's going to play this year. I'll be totally honest. Everyone wants to take down Alabama this year in particular, because they want to prove that the Saban era is over. They want to prove that Saban was the thing that was standing in between them and beating Alabama, not the, team in front of them, not the energy, but it was that guy. And now that that guy is in the stands and not on the sideline, you're going to be more than fine. Now, we'll see if that ends up happening for a lot of these teams. I frankly think a lot of them are going to be very disappointed with that idea, but the reality is this is a huge game for LSU. If they can get that win, then it'll be very interesting conversations. I'll put it that way. But another huge one is Georgia at Ole Miss. This is a week where you're going to see a lot of the SEC be kind of decided in some ways on this week. If Georgia wins, if Bama wins, I think LSU and Ole Miss are likely out of the fight for the SEC title. So this will be a very, very interesting one. I think Ole Miss has a chance to get that marquee win that they really haven't had since those Bama wins back in the day. And I think they're well equipped to just go play Georgia, to not be afraid of the team that's walking in. And obviously, you're going to, lace your shoes a little bit tighter that day. There's no two ways about that. But it doesn't change that Ole Miss thinks they can just hang with this team now. And that wasn't the case a couple of years ago. That wasn't even the case last year. So it'll be fascinating to watch that game. The one I'm so excited for, Oklahoma at Missouri, I just cannot wait for. I think this one is going to be a rivalry going forward because they hate each other. There's no two ways about that. I talked about Texas and A&M. That one coming back is absolutely incredible. No one takes a backseat to Texas A&M, but this one is right there. It is second in line and not far behind the Texas A&M one by any means. So very excited to see that one get underway. Florida State at Notre Dame is an awesome game this week, and it's a funny game because it's not a conference game, so Florida State might not need it quite as much. Notre Dame, I would argue, really needs it because this game, along with the A&M game, are the two that I think if Notre Dame wins those, they're in a very good position to make the playoff. If they don't, then we're having a conversation of, are they really a top 12 team, or are they just a team that beats up on everyone below them and can't beat the people in front of them? So it'll be really interesting to kind of see that one develop because I think Notre Dame, as of right now, I would say has the better team. I think Florida State has a lot of the confidence coming into that game and a lot of the swagger and the defense to definitely keep up with anyone in the country. And then finally, another ACC battle. Clemson going to Virginia Tech is going to be one of the biggest games of the year. Virginia Tech, I think, could walk into this game undefeated. If they go down to Miami and beat Miami, which they definitely can do, this one's going to be two undefeated teams, or not two undefeated teams. Clemson will lose in week 1 to Georgia, but regardless, this is going to be two very good teams, and it's going to be just incredible to watch. Just cannot wait for what's going to happen during that game, and I think if Virginia Tech comes out a winner, then that might just be your ACC champion. But let's get on to Week 14, the rivalry week. It's still just incredible across the board. The Iron Bowl obviously is going to be awesome. As we talked about with LSU, Auburn wants to do the exact same. They want to knock off Bama. They want to kind of flip the script a little bit in Kalen DeBoer's first year, and they got really close a year ago. So let's see what happens there this year. Florida at Florida State is obviously going to be a huge one to watch. Definitely one that could be huge for two different reasons. Florida State could be looking for another undefeated season. Florida could be fighting for bowl eligibility, and Billy Napier could be fighting for his job. So it'll be a fascinating game once it gets here. There's no two ways about that. The game is always awesome. There's no two ways. It's just absolutely incredible. Michigan at Ohio State is going to be everything this upcoming season. It's the game that I'm most excited for. I think it's the single most important game this season, not just because of the on-field implications, but the off-field implications might be that much more important. So it's going to be absolutely incredible to watch that game and see if Michigan can continue this run they're on. And then Texas A&M. This is one that I've talked about a lot, but I might be most excited for this game over any other game this entire season because this is a group of people that just hate each other top to bottom. They hate everything about the other fan base, and it's going to be awesome to see these two meet for the first time in quite some time. It's been just way too long since these two teams have played, and Kyle Field is going to be on fire that night. That is for sure. But finally, Notre Dame at USC. This is one that Colin Cowherd want done away with. He's wrong about that, but that's beside the point. This one's going to be really, really fun. This could be the moment that Notre Dame makes the playoff. Say they have one loss going into this week, and the one loss is to A&M. If they win this game, they're in at 11-1. So this could be the moment they get in. Maybe USC ruins the fun and beats them and knocks them out of the playoffs. So it'll be really, really fascinating to watch that game. Absolutely love that game and the history behind that one. You also have Tech at UGA. Oklahoma State's playing Colorado on that day instead of OU, which is gross, but will be a very fun game nonetheless. Memphis at Tulane is going to be a huge one for the American. South Carolina at Clemson. Washington at Oregon. KSU at Iowa State. So obviously a ton of big-time games in that rivalry week, but a couple other ones. Week 1, Week 9. Week 9, you could have argued, is better than Week 11. I kind of was fighting between two, a rock and a hard place there. But overall, there's so many good weeks this year. College football is going to be absolutely incredible week in, week out. There's going to be new matchups. There's going to be matchups that you usually would have kind of duds of weeks. Oregon and Ohio State's going to be dropped in your lap. Or Washington playing Penn State's going to be dropped in your lap, and it's going to be a really, really interesting thing to watch. So I love this season that's coming up. I think it's going to be the craziest one since 2007, and it's shaping up to have some of the craziest weeks, that's for sure. So we'll break down all of those as they kind of unfold throughout the season, but let's take our final break here, and when we come back, it's Top 10 Tuesday time, and we're going to get into the appointment television players as I see it in college football. There are so many of these guys, so figuring out just 10 was not easy, but I like my 10. I think it's a good group of guys, and definitely guys that if they're on TV, you're going to want to watch them. So stick with us, and we'll break that down right after this. Alrighty, welcome back everyone. We just talked about some of the best weeks of this upcoming season. There are just incredible amounts of weeks that are just off the charts awesome, but I think week 7 takes the cake. It's just absolutely incredible. Probably the best collection of college football games I've seen in quite some time, to be totally honest with you. But let's get into segment 5 here, and let's do a little Top 10 Tuesday. I have a couple of guys that I think if they're on TV, you're just going to want to turn them on. I'll be totally honest with you. Even if you're not interested in the team, even if you don't care about the game, these guys are going to make some plays that you're going to want to see, and you're going to want to see live. So I want to break down the top 10 guys that I have as appointment television guys, the guys that you just have to see live. You got to make sure that you see them as often as you can this upcoming season. And for me, it starts with Cam Ward, the quarterback down at Miami, one of the biggest gets in the portal this past cycle, and he is the ultimate ad-lib player. He is a guy that there could be a million guys around his ankles. There could be a million things happening around him. And then he just kind of squirts out the back and makes a 50-yard pass downfield. It's just ridiculous what this guy is capable of with the ball in his hands. And there are some plays where it's just snap the ball to Cam Ward, let him make a play for himself. It's just ridiculous what he can do. The deep ball is absolutely incredible from him, one of the best in the country. The elusiveness and mobility is really, really good. That's why he flirted with the NFL draft. There is a lot of tools there that guys absolutely love at the NFL level. You love to see a little bit more production and especially some more winning football, and that obviously is what he's trying to do at Miami this year. So if you can combine his tools and everything like that with a couple of wins this upcoming season, I think his NFL draft stock could absolutely skyrocket. And he's one of those guys that, frankly, you're not going to watch a Miami game where he doesn't make a play that makes your jaw drop. I can almost promise you that. At number 9, I do have Luther Burden. I think this is, I've said it time and again, and I'll say it a million times if I need to, this is the best offensive player in the country to me. I think he's an absolute difference maker all across the field, and he does things that most guys on planet Earth cannot do. He's one of the best wide receivers I've seen, whether you're talking about NFL draft or you're talking about college football. I think he's right up there with Marvin Harrison Jr. And I know that sounds a little bit crazy because of how just elite Marvin Harrison was at just about everything on the football field, but Luther Burden can do everything. He's absolutely incredible, can line up really wherever you want him to, and whether you're playing him press, whether you're playing him off, whether you're playing him man or zone, it does not matter. This guy is absolutely different, and he's going to make every single play that you need him to make. So Missouri is a ton of fun on offense, and Luther Burden is one of the biggest reasons for that. Probably the biggest reason for that, to be totally honest. So I cannot wait to watch this guy this upcoming year because he's going to do some special things. I can just feel it. And then I have a gadget guy, just a true gadget guy at number 8 here. Dylan Bell, the wide receiver / running back, more of a wide receiver at this point at Georgia. This guy's awesome. He's one of my favorite players in all of college football because he did some things last year that were just ridiculous. I believe he ran, caught, and passed for a touchdown last year, so gives you an idea of what Mike Bobo can play around with. And when you talk about that Georgia offense, there are just about a million toys you can play around with if you're a play caller. There's so many guys on that offense that can make plays for themselves, that can do so many different things. Dylan Bell is the best of the bunch. He's the most fun. He's the guy that you can literally put in any situation, and he's going to thrive in it. I can almost promise you he will take snaps at quarterback. He will take snaps at running back. He will take snaps at wide receiver, and I bet he will take a snap or two at tight end in line. The dude is just absolutely incredible, so versatile, and one of those guys that has honestly taken this Georgia offense to just a little bit different of a level, where you don't necessarily only have to worry about the quarterback dropping back and passing or the running back getting that handoff and going forward. You have to worry about where Dylan Bell is because he could catch the ball, he could run the ball, he could throw the ball from that perspective. So I do think it's opened up a lot for Mike Bobo, and he just absolutely loves this kid. I know that for a fact. But Avery Johnson, I have at number 7. This guy is just special. Watching him on the football field, and one of the talking points of this offseason that just needs to be talked about more, and it's been talked about, a little bit here and there, but this is a guy that just kicked Will Howard out the door, essentially. He did so good last year that they asked Will Howard to leave that program, and now he's the starter at Ohio State. He's not the starter at Toledo. He's not the starter at Ohio. He's not the starter at Akron. He's the starter at a national title contender. That's how good Avery Johnson is. That's how dynamic he is. That's how much he opens in their offense, and he's just incredible. The running ability is obviously the headliner, but the dude can throw the ball really all over the field. He can do a ton of really incredible things throwing the ball, and I think him taking yet another step forward will be huge for them. Obviously, Colin Klein walking out the door for that A&M job is not ideal, but I think they'll be more than fine. I don't think there's going to be any issue on the offensive side of the ball there, and I think when you have a guy like that, it won't necessarily be too big of a problem, that's for sure. At number 6, I have Jalen Milroe. I feel like the energy around Jalen Milroe is just wrong, to be totally honest with you. I think there are some SEC fan bases out there that, think he's quote-unquote a bum, or think he's just not very good at football, or he can't throw the ball. None of that is really true, but the reality is this is one of the best pure athletes in the entire country. Whatever position you want to bring into the conversation, you can. This guy's different in every sense of the word. He can, obviously, the running the ball is where his money is made. That's his big time thing. That is always what everyone is going to talk about first with him. But the deep ball is incredible. It's one of the best deep balls in the country. You could argue it's the best deep ball in the country as of right now. And I'd be hard-pressed to tell you, I don't think there's a world where he doesn't improve pretty drastically under Kalen DeBoer. I don't necessarily think he's going to be a Heisman winner or do anything absolutely incredible. I do think he's going to take huge steps forward, and I do think he's not as far off as some people want to believe. So I think Jalen Milroe is one of those guys that I just cannot wait to watch, and is going to turn college football on its head just a little bit. I can almost promise you that. And then top 5, Deion Sanders is just had to be on this list. There's no two ways about that. When the ball is in this guy's hands, something remarkable is definitely going to happen. He makes plays out of nothing just so many times, and some of that is out of necessity with the offensive line play that was there a year ago, but the reality is he does things that are just jaw-dropping. There was a play against Nebraska in particular where he evaded a couple of rushers, got out of a really bad situation, and threw an absolute dart for a touchdown. So he has everything you want him to have. Arm talent, mobility, the confidence is part of why he's so good. I understand it rubs some people the wrong way, but all of that stuff that he does, the flashing the watch, doing all that swagger type stuff, that's part of what makes him who he is and part of what makes him as successful as he is. So there's a reason that this guy is a top NFL draft pick. There's a reason that I think, personally, he's going to go number 2 after Carson Beck. I think he's that good, and I think this year is going to be just incredible for him because of the tools. And we saw him last year, but I think we're going to see him even more aggressively this year. So cannot wait for this kid. He's one of my favorite players in the entire country, and I think his ceiling is just through the roof, to be totally honest with you. And then Kevin Concepcion deserves some love here. There's no two ways about that, because every time you see someone at the college football level that's just a human joystick, it's really fun. They're my favorite players of history, whether you talk about Tavon Austin or some other just incredible players. All they were was a joystick. You just ran them out there, gave them the ball, and said, go make a play, and they made a play. And Kevin Concepcion is very much that type of guy. I think he's someone that is going to be a huge piece of that offense this year, and the good news for him, he doesn't need to be everything. Noah Rogers coming in, Justin Jolie coming in is absolutely huge for him, because while he did have over 1,000 all-purpose yards, 10 touchdowns a year ago, I think he's going to be better this year because of those two other guys opening up doors for him and letting him be who he can be. I think this is an offensive player of the year in the ACC type player. I think he really is capable of just incredible things this upcoming year, and just one of those guys that the second you turn on the TV, you can tell something's a little bit different about number 10 in NC State. So definitely will be a very fun player to watch there. To the top 3, James Pierce Jr. got to get some love here, because edge rusher is not always the easiest position to get a beat on who's the best and who's the worst, because there's a lot of edge rushers that have different responsibilities. There's some that, whether you're playing fully outside or a little bit more inside against the tackle, sometimes you're playing just to set an edge. Sometimes you're playing just to play the run a little bit more. So there are certain edge rushers that don't jump off the page but are really talented players. James Pierce Jr. is not one of those players. If you watch number 27 for Tennessee this upcoming year, he's going to do some things that are just going to be jaw-droppingly incredible. He's going to dominate pretty much every offensive tackle he goes up against. He has some big-time guys that he's going to have to face, but he's just ridiculous. He's absolutely insane, and he's one of those guys that even Tennessee has a ton of appointment television guys, as I would say. Nico, I think, is absolutely one. Chris Brazzell is someone I'm really watching closely. Squirrel White is absolutely incredible. Dylan Sampson, Arian Carter. This guy trumps them by a mile. He is so incredible, and one of those guys that there's a reason that he might just be the number one overall pick this time next year with the NFL draft. So it'll be fascinating to watch this guy. Absolutely love what he can do, and if you have a chance, just watch him for a Tennessee game, and you'll see some pretty incredible things. The top two, I do have Caden Salter at number 2. I wanted to get some love to some group of 5 teams, and this is the most electric guy in the group of 5 and maybe in the country. He does some things on the football field that are just ridiculous, and I think one of the things that I talked about a little bit earlier with Cam Ward, it applies even more to Caden Salter. This is a guy where there might just be a play in the Liberty playbook that just says snap the ball. I'm being totally honest. It might just say snap the ball and let Caden Salter do Caden Salter things, because it's ridiculous what this guy can do. Some of the guys in the past who have had elite running ability, there's, a little bit of a gap. Some aren't, some are really capable runners, but aren't necessarily the athletic, crazy runners that we've seen in the past. This is one of those crazy runners, the Jaden Daniels of the world, the Kyler Murrays of the world, the guys that once they get out in open field, no one's catching them. So Caden Salter I absolutely love, and I think he has every chance to lead Liberty to another undefeated season, and then we'll see what happens on Selection Sunday. But I absolutely love this kid, and will be tuning into Liberty quite a bit to watch Caden Salter, that's for sure. And then finally, no one else deserves to be number 1. Travis Hunter is on a totally different level than pretty much everyone else in college football. He does things on a football field that not only do most humans are not capable of doing, most humans shouldn't do. Just to be totally honest with you. As people say, he is literally built different. The dude plays 130 snaps one day and then wakes up the next morning and does a double workout. It is ridiculous what this kid is capable of, and another reason why Colorado will very likely have 2 guys in the top 10 to 15 picks in the next year's draft, depending on where Travis Hunter goes. I think it'll be somewhere in the late 10s, maybe a little bit into the teens, but this guy is remarkably talented, and whether it's wide receiver or corner, he's going to be incredible. The wide receiver tends to be where he's going to be long-term, at least that's what I've seen around people that know a little bit more about the scouting process than I do, but definitely if you want to play him at corner, he's going to be more than fine. The ball skills are absolutely incredible, and he does things that are just ridiculous, truly. Every time I see a stat line from Travis Hunter, particularly the number of snaps he played, it's just ridiculous that anyone can do what he can do. So obviously he had to be on this list. Obviously he had to be number 1 on this list, because this kid's just different in every sense of the word. But that'll do it for this edition of the GSMC College Football Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Sports Network. Your support means a ton to us, so please remember to subscribe to the show, leave a positive review. It does make a huge difference. Also, follow us on Facebook, Twitter, TikTok, Instagram for all of the social updates you need. We have so many people doing... We have so many people doing just incredible work across every single sport you could possibly want. So no worries about the world of sports. If you need anything, come on over to GSMC and we have you totally covered. But thank you once again for listening, and I will see you guys tomorrow.